Jimmy Kimmel has just been suspended indefinitely from his late-night show, and the reason why is sending shockwaves across television, politics, and the internet. What started as a single comment about the tragic death of Charlie Kirk has exploded into something much bigger, drawing in the head of the FCC, ABC's most powerful affiliates, and even Donald Trump himself. Memes are flying, conspiracy theories are spreading, and people are asking, is this accountability or censorship at its most extreme? Tonight, we're diving deep into how one monologue brought down one of late night's biggest names, what this means for the future of TV comedy, and why everyone online can't stop talking about it. Stay tuned, because this story only gets wilder the further you go.
We had some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. In between the finger pointing, there was grieving. On Friday, the White House flew the flags at half-staff, which got some criticism. But on a human level, you can see how hard the president is taking this.
My condolences on the loss of your friend Charlie Kirk. May I ask, sir, personally, how are you holding up over the last day and a half, sir?
I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all the trucks? They've just started construction of the new ballroom for the White House, which is something they've been trying to get, as you know, for about 150 years. And it's going to be a beauty.
Yes. He's at the fourth stage of grief, construction. Demolition, construction. This is not how an adult grieves the murder of someone he called a friend. This is how a 4-year-old mourns a goldfish, okay?
On the night in question, Kimmel opened his monologue with a somber reflection. The news had just broken. Charlie Kirk, a conservative activist and founder of Turning Point USA, had been killed. Millions were grieving, and tensions online were already running high. At first, Kimmel's tone felt appropriate. He acknowledged the tragedy, expressed sympathy, and even posted earlier that day on Instagram, "Can we just for one day agree that it is horrible and monstrous to shoot another human?" But then, in front of a live audience, he pivoted. Instead of staying with condolences, he suggested that members of the MAGA gang were twisting the narrative of the shooter's identity. He implied that conservatives were trying to spin the story to protect themselves politically. That was the moment everything shifted. Supporters of Kirk called it heartless. Critics accused Kimmel of politicizing a murder before the family had even buried their loved one. Online, the backlash was instant and fierce. And here's the kicker, Kimmel wasn't just making a joke. He was making a claim about political motives, and that blurred the line between comedy and commentary in a way that many said was reckless. But the real firestorm didn't come from Twitter trolls or political pundits. It came from the very top of the government. Backhand index pointing right, but that wasn't the whole story. Because within hours, the most powerful regulator in broadcasting weighed in, and that's when the walls started closing in on Kimmel. Enter Brendan Carr, chair of the Federal Communications Commission. Normally, the FCC doesn't comment on late-night comedy bits. But this time, Carr came out swinging. He called Kimmel's remarks sick and beyond the pale. Why was this so explosive? Because the FCC isn't just a watchdog, it's the agency that controls broadcast licenses. If the FCC says a network is crossing lines, that network's future could literally be at risk. Think about it. ABC is a broadcast network. Unlike YouTube or Netflix, it's subject to government oversight. The FCC can fine stations, restrict licenses, and make life very difficult for anyone who doesn't play by the rules. So when Carr publicly condemned Kimmel, it wasn't just criticism. It was a shot across the bow, one that ABC executives couldn't afford to ignore. And this wasn't happening in a vacuum. The political climate is hotter than ever. With conservatives accusing late-night shows of liberal bias and Democrats defending comedians' right to push boundaries, Carr's comments felt less like a neutral regulator speaking and more like politics seeping into entertainment. Backhand index pointing right, and that was only the beginning. Because once affiliates started speaking up, Kimmel's future went from shaky to impossible. Behind the scenes, pressure mounted fast. Nexstar Media Group, one of the largest owners of ABC affiliates across the country, decided it wouldn't sit quietly. Andrew Alford, Nexstar's president, released a blistering statement. He called Kimmel's remarks offensive and insensitive, making it clear that affiliates had no interest in airing content that could bring the wrath of regulators or advertisers down on their stations. Here's why that mattered. Affiliates are the backbone of broadcast television. Without them, a late-night show has no distribution, no reach, no ratings. If Nexstar pulled out, Jimmy Kimmel Live would essentially vanish from large parts of the U.S. overnight. ABC executives suddenly had no choice. Disney, ABC's parent company, made the call. Kimmel's show would be preempted indefinitely. They avoided the word canceled, but everyone knew what it meant. Imagine being Kimmel. One night you're cracking jokes in front of a live audience, and the next, your entire career is hanging by a thread because the network pulled the plug. Backhand index pointing right, but as ABC scrambled to protect itself, something else was happening online, and it turned a TV controversy into a cultural war. If you've ever seen the internet react to a scandal, you know how fast it can spiral. But this time, it was on another level. Hashtags like hashtag Kimmel canceled, hashtag free speech or not, and hashtag cancel culture trended worldwide. On Twitter, people argued nonstop. Was this censorship, or was it accountability? Reddit threads dissected every detail of Kimmel's monologue. TikTok filled with memes mocking ABC's decision. Some clips edited Kimmel into scenes from South Park and The Simpsons, framing him as a cautionary tale about comedians going too far. Conspiracy theories also gained traction. Some users claimed Disney executives had been waiting for an excuse to dump Kimmel because of sliding ratings. Others suggested government pressure had forced ABC's hand. No matter which side you believed, one thing was undeniable. The internet had turned Jimmy Kimmel into the main character of the week. And in today's media landscape, that kind of attention is both powerful and dangerous. Backhand index pointing right, but then came the voice that poured gasoline on the fire, Donald Trump.
Well, Jimmy Kimmel was fired because he had bad ratings more than anything else, and he said a horrible thing about a great gentleman known as Charlie Kirk. And Jimmy Kimmel is not a talented person. He had very bad ratings, and they should have fired him a long time ago. So, you can call that free speech or not. He was fired for lack of talent.
When Trump speaks, headlines follow. And he wasted no time reacting to Kimmel's suspension. On Truth Social, Trump declared it great news for America. He mocked Kimmel as part of the untalented late-night sweepstakes and congratulated ABC for finally doing what he claimed should have been done years ago. For Trump supporters, it was vindication. For years, they've accused late-night hosts of mocking conservatives while protecting liberals. Kimmel's suspension was framed as proof that the tide had turned. But critics saw something darker, a former president cheering the silencing of a comedian and regulators backing him up. Was this accountability or political pressure dressed up as justice? Either way, Trump's comments amplified the moment, ensuring it wasn't just about one host, it was about the culture war itself. Backhand index pointing right, and as politics clashed with comedy, the entire late-night industry started asking itself a terrifying question: who's next? Behind the cameras, late-night hosts across networks felt the shockwaves. Stephen Colbert, Seth Meyers, even Jimmy Fallon, all suddenly had reason to worry. Writers began second-guessing punchlines. Producers debated whether political jokes were worth the risk. And executives whispered about the new reality. If one wrong word could bring the FCC and affiliates down on a show, then the era of edgy late-night satire might be over. Think about it, late-night comedy has always thrived on controversy. From Johnny Carson's sly political digs to Jon Stewart's fiery monologues, pushing boundaries was the point. But now those boundaries seemed narrower than ever. For audiences, the question became, what's the point of watching if every comedian is terrified of crossing the line? Backhand index pointing right, but while the industry panicked, the debate outside boiled down to one big question: was this cancel culture or consequence culture? Here's where opinions split down the middle. On one side, you had people calling this cancel culture on steroids. To them, Kimmel was just another victim of an outraged mob, silenced because he dared to say something unpopular. On the other side, critics argued this wasn't cancellation at all, it was accountability. They said Kimmel wasn't punished for being edgy. He was punished for being careless, turning a tragedy into a punchline before the family even had time to grieve. This divide matters because it's not just about Kimmel. It's about how we judge anyone who crosses lines in public. Do we say they've been unfairly canceled? Or do we say they've faced consequences for their choices? And depending on how you answer, you'll see this story very differently. Backhand index pointing right, but the one person who hasn't spoken much? Kimmel himself. And that silence is deafening. Right now, ABC says Jimmy Kimmel Live is suspended indefinitely. That phrase leaves the door open, but it also casts doubt. Behind the scenes, Disney executives are divided. Some believe Kimmel is too valuable to lose his brand, his audience, his history. Others think keeping him risks another backlash that could hurt advertisers and affiliates. And Kimmel? Aside from his earlier Instagram post offering condolences, he's stayed quiet. No interviews, no fiery defenses, no apologies. Silence. That could be strategy, waiting for the storm to pass. Or it could be resignation, a sign that he knows his late-night career is finished. If he returns, it'll be under more scrutiny than ever. If he doesn't, he'll go down as another casualty of the cultural battlefield. Backhand index pointing right, but here's the twist. Even if ABC doesn't bring him back, Kimmel might not be gone for good. Because the future of unfiltered voices isn't on television anymore, it's online. While ABC scrambles, creators on YouTube, Rumble, and podcasts are watching closely. Because here's the truth, those platforms aren't under FCC control. That means comedians, commentators, and even controversial voices have more freedom online than they ever will on broadcast television. And millions of viewers are already shifting from cable to digital. So what happens if Jimmy Kimmel decides to ditch late night and launch his own digital show? He'd have an audience, sponsors, and zero FCC oversight. And that's the irony. By suspending him, ABC may have just pushed one of their biggest names toward the very platforms taking viewers away from them. The suspension of Jimmy Kimmel isn't just about one man or one joke. It's a turning point in media history. It shows how fragile the balance is between comedy and controversy, between free speech and regulation, between holding someone accountable and silencing them. For some, Kimmel's punishment was justice, proof that even celebrities can't say whatever they want without consequences. For others, it was censorship, evidence that politics and regulators now have the power to decide who gets to speak. And beyond Kimmel, the message is clear: the rules of late-night TV have changed forever. The era of boundary-pushing comedians on broadcast may be ending, replaced by a safer, quieter version, or by a full migration to online platforms where freedom is broader, but consequences still exist. So as viewers, we're left with one question: if this could happen to Jimmy Kimmel, who's next? And maybe the scarier question: what happens when the next joke lands wrong, not in a comedy club, not on YouTube, but on live television, in front of millions? Because in today's world, one sentence can end a career. And that's no joke.